It's a quote by a man named Sun Tzu. He said, "Warfare is the greatest affair of state, the basis of life and death, the way to survival or extinction. It must be thoroughly pondered and analyzed." He wrote this in 500 BC in a book called The Art of War by a Chinese man. He wasn't thinking about spiritual warfare, but about 500 years later, someone else wrote this: "Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm." Another quote from Sun Tzu, and this is in your notes, and by the way, I hope you have your notes so you can be following this, but he said, "One who knows," I've got it here, "one who knows the enemy and knows himself will not be endangered in 100 engagements. One who does not know the enemy but knows himself will sometimes be victorious, sometimes meet with defeat. One who neither knows the enemy nor himself will invariably be defeated in every engagement." And I spent 4 years studying Bible and theology and then 2 years studying education. I learned how to exegete in Greek and how to prepare Bible lessons, how to teach, but didn't learn much about spiritual warfare. And when I engaged in ministry, I was surprised by things I didn't expect. Surprised by things like, why are my kids waking up in the middle of the night screaming in terror and saying there's something under the bed when there's nothing really there? Is that just we didn't eat a good dinner? Is that maybe the bedtime story wasn't right? Or are there spiritual forces going on that are applied against us? Why does it seem like whenever you're going to a great evangelistic event, your car breaks down? Is that just chance, or is that part of spiritual warfare or not? Or why, when I'm talking, I had a conversation with someone in our church she was a judge, well-educated, had trusted Christ, and she said, "Sometimes I stand in my kitchen and I'm overcome with an uncontrollable urge to take a knife and stab my baby." What's that? How can an educated woman who's a judge who also believes in Jesus somehow in a minute feel like I'm going to stab my baby? Where's that coming from? And I realized that I had to do a lot of work in understanding spiritual warfare and understanding how to work in the unseen world. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that the Bible says and some of the things that we just learned over the years in this particular area. One of the things that we need to recognize is that you have three main enemies. Not all of them are seen or unseen, but they're all allied against us. The first one is the world. So 1 John 2, and if you've got your Bibles, we'll be flipping fast, but it'd be important to get into this. 1 John 2, 15 through 17. "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever." So, how does the world war against me? What do you see from that passage?
Seduction.
What's that?
Seduction.
Seduction, and of what kind? What kind of seduction?
It appeals to the pleasure-seeking person within me.
Okay, the pleasure-seeking person in me. Okay, what else? There's different kinds of lust, so that's pulling on me. What kinds? Yeah. Visual, the lust of the eyes. What else?
Beauty.
Beauty, the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. So we could understand this, that it pulls on what my body wants, the lust of the flesh, what my body wants. What my eyes want, which is sometimes to possess something or to engage in some kind of sensual acts with my eyes. And what my ego wants, the pride of life. So what my body wants, what my eyes want, and what my ego wants. And just think of how much of the world economy, the engine of world economy, is generated by these three desires. I'll spend money on food, I'll spend money on a house that keeps me warm, an air conditioning that keeps me cool, because that's what my body wants. My eyes want various things. I'll go to a movie because that fills my eyes. And then maybe I'll buy a better car than the guy next to me so I can show off that, I'm someone. So this is the engine of the world economy, and it's actually warring against us. What are we, how do I fight against it? According to these verses.
Don't love it.
Don't love it. Isn't that interesting? Don't love it. So I actually have to monitor my loves and my affections and make sure that I don't love the world. And what would help me from this verse to not love the world? Towards the end of the verse, he says something. To do God's will. All right. What else in there?
To follow the example of Christ.
Follow the example of Christ, yeah. Anything else in that verse that would help me not love the world? He says the world is what? Passing away. So an understanding that everything that I see is actually vapor. It looks like it's solid, but it's not. That what I see is not firm. The unseen world is firm. And that I just realize the temporal nature of all of this, but know that the one who does the will of God lives forever. So part of how I war against the world is making sure I don't get attached to it, and that I am attached to things that have eternal value, so that I treat it with open hands. I can have it, I cannot. Just like when Jesus says, I have food that you don't know about. You're appealing to the desires of my flesh, but there actually are things that are even more real than that. What will happen if I ignore the fight? Okay, I think a great picture is of the weedy soil and the soils. What will happen is these lusts of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, all these worries will choke off fruit, and I'll just be full of temporal things and get to the end of my life and realize there's nothing that's been accomplished. So I'm in this war against the world all the time, and one of my main tactics is not love the world, love other things much more, so that I align my life around that which has eternal value. Okay, here's the second one, the flesh. In 1 Peter 2:11 says, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul." So my flesh, my old nature, is actually waging war against my soul. And Galatians 5:17 says, "For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh, for these are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do." So there's a war going on here. How does it wage war against me? How does it wage war against me? Well, it has strong desires that it tries to push on me. It has desires that are opposed to the desires of the Spirit, and I end up not doing what I want to. It tries to get my attention, to make me its slave, and that's why Paul says, "Who will set me free from this law of sin and death that has hold over the members of my body?" How do I fight against it? And actually, we didn't read the verse that talks about this. But how do I fight against it? Look at verse 24. "Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires." And all of the texts that talk about how you war against the Spirit talk about putting the flesh to death. Put to death, therefore, Colossians says, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. So my main tactic against the flesh is sometimes they call it a mortification of the flesh, putting it to death. Now that doesn't mean that it goes away from me. I'll have it till the day I die, but I act as if it doesn't even live. I act as if it has no power over my life. I ignore the desires of the flesh and say, you're not going to be fulfilled. I'm going to count you dead. What will happen if I ignore the fight? Well, particularly, each of these passages talk about slavery. What will happen is I'll end up not doing the things that I want to do, and I'll end up doing things that I don't want to do. I'll see the fruit of the flesh in my life rather than the fruit of the Spirit. And even though my mind will want to do God's law, Romans, I'll find that there's another law at work in the members of my body holding me hostage to the law of sin and death. And so I can become a slave. So what do you do with the world? You don't love it, right? What do you do with the flesh? You put it to death. And then we have a third enemy, and that's the devil. And the word devil or Satan, both of them mean the adversary. And 1 Peter 5 is a great one along these lines. 1 Peter 5, 8 and 9. He says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, really he's saying your adversary, the adversary, prowls about like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. So one of the things that Scripture does is assumes that there's an unseen world that's allied against us in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes. So I have three allies. Now sometimes people, three adversaries, they're not the same, but they work together, and sometimes we get them mixed up. Sometimes we say, oh, this person is really struggling with lust, let's cast the demon of lust out of him. Well, that could just be the flesh, right? You could be discouraged, not because Satan's attacking you, but because your flesh is pulling you down. But they do work together, kind of like in World War II, you had all the allies. Is it Russia that's attacking me or someone else? I don't know. Actually, those were on the good side back then, weren't they? But they were allied. They work together and they energize each other. But it is important for us to know who we're working against, because if I resist the flesh, it won't flee from me. Right? If I put to death Satan, it doesn't do anything. If I try not to love Satan, that also doesn't do anything. And so it's helpful for us to know, who am I fighting against and what are my tactics? If I'm fighting against the flesh, I put it to death. If I'm fighting against Satan, I resist him. If I'm fighting against the world, I don't love it. So in fact, we can do a couple motions so we can just get this. If it's the world, you don't love it. If it's Satan, you resist him. If it's the flesh, you put it to death. Okay, so do we do that together? So the world, don't love the world. Satan, resist. Stand against him. And the flesh, put it to death. One more time, just so we make sure it gets. The world, don't love it. Satan, resist him. And death. The flesh, put it to death. Put it to death. Now, it's important, I'm going through that quickly because now we're going to start diving deeper into Satan and his forces, but I want you to understand that that's not your only enemy, and that he will sometimes ally with other forces, and some of your warfare will take different tactics. You're fighting a three-front war. What is Satan like? If you know your enemy and know yourself, you'll be victorious in 100 encounters, said Sun Tzu. If you don't know your enemy, you're going to be defeated. So what is Satan like? Well, let's look at several things that help us know more about him. Where did he come from? Look at Ezekiel 28. And we'll start in verse 11. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre and say to him, thus says the Lord. So you might be saying, I thought you said we were going to talk about Satan. Why are we talking about the king of Tyre? And this is one of those spots where we believe he's talking about the king of Tyre, but then immediately looks behind the king of Tyre to the force that's allied behind him, because he says things like, you were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Well, the king of Tyre wasn't in any of those places. So this is one of those kind of near-far views where we believe that he's actually talking about the power allied behind the king of Tyre. And let's find out so we believe he's talking about Satan here. Let's find out some things he says. You're the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and beauty, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, emerald, and carbuncle. Crafted in gold were your settings and your engravings. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till unrighteousness was found in you. In the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned. Okay, just give me some observations about Satan that you pick up from this passage. What do you learn about him?
He was created.
He was created. This is very important because there's a tendency to adopt more of an Eastern view of good and evil, or what we learn from Star Wars, that there's a dark force and a light force, and they're in constant, the yin and the yang, they're in constant fighting with each other, and that Satan is kind of the dark side of the force and God's the good side, but they're kind of equal. Well, they're not equal. God is eternal. Satan was created. Satan is a created being. He is in no way equal with God. So that's very important. What else?
Seems to be a magnificent being, doesn't he?
Magnificent being. So we get these pictures of Satan with a tail and ugly and horns, and that more of his internal nature, but he was beautiful. So he doesn't have a problem being beautiful. What else do you get?
Full of wisdom.
Full of wisdom. And wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge to specific situations. So he's been studying mankind for thousands of years, and he can put the pieces together. What else?
He's an angel.
He's an angel. He's an angel. Okay, that's going to be important. We'll get back to that later on. So he has characteristics of an angel. What kind of angel is he? Cherubim. Where were the cherubim? They were directly in the presence of God. He was a guardian angel, so he actually had responsibility to guard the holiness of God, which is just crazy that from that spot he fell. But it also means he was very powerful. He was in the top ranking of angels in terms of power. Anything else?
He was in the garden of God.
He was in the garden of God. In Eden, in the garden of God. He knows God's territory really well. He knows his way around the spiritual world. It's not it's not an unknown world for him. In fact, he still visits places like the presence of God. You see that in Job. Anything else?
The precious stones that made him beautiful. I don't know if all of them, but most of them are mentioned in Revelation.
Yeah.
Talking about the Holy City.
Yeah, so these are actually, he was associated with some very precious things which he could misuse then. The symbols that we wouldn't recognize because they're actually wonderful symbols that he misuses, which is interesting. And what about this, in the abundance of your trade? Did any of you ever catch that Satan is a trader? He's not just a traitor, but he's a trader. How do traders make their money? How do they get wealthy?
Making something. Sell it.
Okay, actually traders don't make anything. They're not producers. Traders make nothing. What do?
Exchange.
They exchange things. That's how they make their money, is by exchanging things. And how does a good trader make a lot of money? He wants to exchange something of less value for something of more value. So what he gets is valuable, what he loses is of less value. And so Satan is always trading. He's not a creator. He can't make anything. All he can do is take things that God has made and trade with them and create fakes, like that wristwatch that looks just like a $100,000 watch, but it's a fake. And he's just always trading. And you'll find that's the way he works with people. Hey, you want to be famous? Just give me some of control over your life. He did this with Jesus. Bow down to me, I'll give you all the kings of the world. He's trading. But what he's always trying to do is get much more from us than what we lose. So, and by the way, I think that Satan and his forces, they're the original mafia. And so they're business people, but they do not do clean business, and it's about threats. It's about hey, I'll protect you from the guys who'll break your arm. but the guys who break your arm are my guys. So there's all this trading, like, I'll save you from getting your arm broken by my guys. Okay, well, that's great. If you'll give me 100 euros. And you see, it's all this trading where he's actually working both sides of the deal all the time to gain the upper hand. 17, your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. So, what was his sin? The core of his sin was the sin of pride, which is why pride is so dangerous for us, because we're walking into space that Satan knows very well and that caused his downfall. Cast you to the grounds, I exposed you before kings. And then he says, by the multitude of your iniquities and the unrighteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. And then he goes out and talks about he's going to come to a dreadful end. So that gives us some very interesting insights into his character, how he works. Who does he work with? Revelation 12:9. Let's take a look at this. Revelation 12:9, and the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil, and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So his angels, he has angels. And then if you look at Revelation 12:3-4, his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them down to earth. So how many angels does Satan have? He has a third of them. We don't know how many angels exist, but we know that he has a third, which means that God has twice as many angels as Satan does. And one of the things we need to know in spiritual warfare is it's always asymmetrical warfare. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. It's not warfare between two equal forces. It's not like let's take Russia and China, or China and the United States. This is ISIS and United States, or something like that. He is massively outnumbered. The power on the other side is so much greater. And so how do people work in isometric warfare? When they have much less power, much less money, much less strength, how do they work? What do they try to do?
Guerrilla.
What's that?
Guerrilla.
Guerrilla warfare, right. And what is guerrilla warfare like? It's sneaky. It's hidden. They don't want a direct fight because they'll lose. So it's a lot about trickery. It's about blowing people up in the middle of the day in a major train station because he wants to project more force than he actually has. So I want to make a whole nation scared by doing something over here because I actually can't kill them all. So I'm going to kill a couple, make everyone else run. So these are kind of his tactics. He's always working to increase his footprint larger than it really is, to project more strength than he really has, to work through fear and intimidation and trickery. That's his, because this is not a fair fight, which is one of the reasons why when we get to how we go against him, we have to actually confront him directly, because Christ is much stronger. In the direct confrontation, he will not win. He does not want the direct confrontation. He wants the indirect, sneaky, slip around when you aren't knowing it. He wants not to be seen and heard and not to be found out. So typically, the way Satan works is he'll either work really quietly or really loudly. Because either he doesn't want you to know that he's there, or he wants to overplay his hand and make it look like he's controlling everything. So that's the two things. In fact, even if you deal with people who are demonized, you have to watch this tactic, because the demon will hide, and then it will try to make a scene, and make everyone feel like, oh no, there's this powerful force in the room that's going to overtake us all. Because it's that underplay or overplay, because the reality is that he's a defeated foe who is much smaller and weaker than the forces of God. Colossians 1:16, it's also interesting to see that the spiritual world has a certain organizational system to it. Colossians 1:16 says, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. He's saying there's thrones, rulers, dominions, and authority. And I believe he's talking actually about the spiritual world there, which is similar to what he says in Ephesians 6, where he says, 6:12, where he says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces in the heavenly realms." What is he talking about? It seems like there's ranks and types of demonic forces. So he's saying, like, we don't just fight against the Marines, we also fight against the Air Force and also against the Green Beret. And so there's sections of demons that have particular specialties. There's ranks, there's demonic forces that are stronger than other demonic forces. And they're organized and ranked. And so as we come against them, we'll come against an organized and ranked unseen world. And you see this in Daniel 10, in a very interesting and fascinating passage where Daniel begins to pray. Daniel chapter 10 and 4, it goes 4 through 13. So he starts to pray, and then this angelic being appears to him. He falls down to the ground. And then in verse 12, the angel says, "Then he said to me, 'Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you sent your heart to understand and humbled yourself before the Lord, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what's to happen.'" So we have this angel that's coming with a message, and he's opposed by who? The prince of the kingdom of Persia. Who was that? Was that a man? Well, how could a man oppose an angel? It looks like that there's an angelic being who is the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and Michael had to come to break through. And so one of the things that it seems like is that even demonic forces are organized in ways that might reflect country territories. So there might be high-level demonic forces that are assigned to Poland or to Czech or to some other places, and organized systems of angelic beings allied against God that might be, I really believe, you can't pray with this 100%, but tied to geographical areas. Do you ever notice that sometimes when you cross a country boundary that the spiritual climate changes? That there are certain battles that are true in some countries that aren't in others? Even if you're from that country. I remember talking to a Serbian, and he said, whenever I go back to Serbia, I want to kill someone. He says, I just feel that. It's just in the air. I know that I live in the Czech Republic, and I struggle with doubt and discouragement in that nation more than I do any other place. I drive across the border to Austria, and all of a sudden, I'm not discouraged anymore. I'm not feeling doubt. But if I fly back to the United States, pretty soon I'm going, hey, that guy has a big church over there. I wonder if I was here, if I'd have a bigger church than he would. And I start feeling competitive and pride. Where does that come from? And you find that there are spiritual forces in these different countries that affect us, even without us knowing it, just when we cross the border. You find that's true?
Yes.
So I think one of the things is we need to be aware of them and know that we might have to take particular stands against them. Now, there's some people who say, okay, let's pray against the chief demon of Poland and take him down. And there's no evidence in the Bible that that's something we should do. There probably is a chief demon of Poland, but our battle is mostly right in front of us. It doesn't say that I was supposed to take down you don't find Daniel taking down the spiritual force of the king of Persia. You find him moving forward in spite of that opposition because he knows how to fight. And so we fight in front of us, and we need to be aware that it's a bigger battle. And here's who does he work with? Ephesians 2 says, talks about let me get this. Ephesians 2:2, he says, you were dead in your transgressions and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air. The power that is now at work in those who believe. And then in John 14:30, Jesus said, we must go, for the ruler of this world is coming. So he also works with the world systems because he's called the ruler of this world. And James 3:6 says that my tongue can be set on fire by the fires of hell. So here we see the cooperation between the world, the devil, and the flesh, that they work together and they're allied, and we can see them working together in that kind of way. But it's important to know that he's not omniscient. 1 Peter 1:12 talks about angels and said the angels long to look into these things. They don't see all these things. He's not omnipresent. In Job, you see him going up into the presence of God and then leaving the presence of God to go and bring trouble on Job, and then going back up again. He's not everywhere at once, and he's not omnipotent. He's not all-powerful. 1 Peter 3:22 says that all authorities in heaven and earth have been put under the final authority of Jesus Christ. So he's not omniscient, he's not omnipresent, he's not omnipotent. He can't do everything. I don't think he knows the future. I think he's just a really good guesser. And sometimes he says things and then makes them happen. He can't see the future. I'm not sure that he can know all that's going on in my mind. And so because of that, when I'm in spiritual warfare, I generally pray out loud. I'll speak to the spiritual forces of evil out loud because they don't know everything. And maybe if you give them access to your mind, they can, but they don't necessarily have it automatically. And they're not omnipotent. They can't do everything. Neither are they omnipresent. So if you say, Satan's tempting me, it's probably not Satan. It's probably not the devil. But just like you might say, Hitler attacked, it wasn't Hitler that attacked, it was his forces. So we use those phrases to mean that, but Satan can only be in one place at one time, so you probably are not being tempted by him. You're probably being tested by one of his servants. What's he like? Well, here's another question. How does he attack and how does he operate? And the Bible gives us various names of Satan that give us lots of insight into his tactics. And so then it helps us recognize, he's terrorists plant bombs on trains. Oh, there's a bomb on a train. That's probably a terrorist. So we can know a lot from these names. And here's the first one: accuser of the brethren, who accuses them day and night. So what's one of his tactics?
Accusation.
Accuse. And who particularly does he accuse? Christians. So he has a special affinity for accusing Christians. And it says he does it day and night, so it means he can do it in the night. And you find in Zechariah, you find Joshua the high priest standing in the presence of God with filthy garments, and Satan standing right by him and accusing him. So he's not afraid to accuse the high priest, and he's not afraid to accuse us in the presence of God. He loves to accuse. So in spiritual warfare, you need to count on the fact that you will be opposed by accusations. And have you ever gotten ready to speak somewhere or share and been flooded with accusations? What do you think you're doing? That was so rotten. How? You don't have authority to do that. Or you finish something that God has really used, and you're just buried in self-doubt and shame. I remember once I was preparing for some training of youth leaders, and I had already taught once, and I was preparing for my next teaching, and I couldn't even think because my mind was so full of accusations. No one understands you. You didn't do that very well in check. You have nothing to say. Just find a way just to go home and not let anyone know. And I was actually laying on my bed trying to prepare. I was at a conference, and all of a sudden I went, I am under attack, because I was actually trying to put it to death. I was treating it like it was a flesh. No, don't think that. Stop that. I'm being attacked. So one of the things is you always want to stand. That's also in Ephesians. You stand. So I'm laying down. I can't fight Satan laying down. So I stood like this, and I said, in the name of Jesus, leave, Satan. Resist the devil and he'll flee from you, right? I believe what Christ has said about me and who I am in him. I deny the accusations that you're putting against me, and I command you to go. And it was like somebody just flipped a switch. Boom. All of a sudden I got a clear head again. I could go prepare. I go, why didn't I do that 2 hours earlier? I would have saved so much energy. But that's that. What do? You resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. You take a stand against him. You put on the armor. You engage him. And the Bible says he has to go. So we need to know how to resist the accuser and not accept what he says. He's a roaring lion, according to 1 Peter 5:8. What do roaring lion, what is the tactic here? Now, I asked someone in Africa, I said, tell me a little bit about this, roaring lion. And he says, you know that roaring lions almost never roar when they're hunting? Because when you're hunting, what do they have these padded feet, and they want to sneak up on the prey and jump on them without anyone knowing. He says they only roar in this condition when they're hunting together. And one lion will go to this side of the herd, and the others will go to the other side. And the lion will roar, and they'll all run directly into the other lions who are being quiet. And he said, when a lion roars, you never run, because the greatest danger is in the direction you run. And this is exactly the same with Satan. He will try to scare us, but when he's roaring, we know exactly where he is. You know where the lion is. You know exactly where the lion that's roaring is. You don't know what's hidden in the direction he's trying to get you to run. And we run into something that actually devours us. So his tactic is exactly what you said. It's a tactic of fear that causes us to flee towards our greatest danger, because we think we're actually going away from danger, but we're going towards it. My brother serves in Slovenia. And one time, one of the elders, someone in his Bible study said, I have someone in my apartment building who is Muslim, and she every night is waking up, she's tormented by evil spirits in the night, and she was wondering if there's anything we could do about it. And I said, well, maybe we could come and pray. And he said to my brother, would you come and pray for this lady that she would get released from that torment that she's having in the middle of the night? And my brother Josh said, sure, no problem. So they're walking to his apartment building through the streets of Ljubljana, talking Slovene together. And they're talking like this. And on the other side of a street comes kind of a homeless, disheveled man who's kind of walking along like this, and he's muttering under his breath. And all of a sudden he stops, looks at them, walks across the street, walks right up to my brother, and in perfect English says, turn back, go home right now. Keeps walking. That'd be freaky, wouldn't it? Whoa, what just happened? Oh my. Yeah, that's actually, crazy. So what do? They keep going, right? Because okay, we're on track. You move towards the issue, because if Satan's roaring, we know exactly where he is. We're staying, we're moving. But wouldn't it be easy to go, oh my, what was that? Oh no, how did he know? We're outnumbered. And then we flee, and we flee in the direction of danger. So he makes us afraid, so we'll run. Angel of light. What does an angel of light do?
It's an imitation of real angels.
It's an imitation of real angels. Yeah? What else? Angel of light. Light attracts. Light draws my attention. Light makes things sparkle. So he pretends to be good, attractive, and beautiful, so that I think I'm getting something great. So this is this pretending. So I need to realize that there are times that he's going to portray himself. This is what he does to Eve in the garden. If you eat of that fruit, you'll get this knowledge of good and evil, this sparkling, amazing thing that you're missing. Come this direction. And so that's the way he works. We need to understand that. And then you get there and find out that the opposite is true. He's a thief. What do thieves do? They try to take things that are precious to us, precious to God, and make them his. And thieves don't come into your house and steal your trash. They don't steal your old books. They're always looking for the most valuable things that are the most portable, that they can get the quickest, and that's what they want to take. What are some of the things that are the most valuable to you? What's that? Someone said that? Time, yeah. So say if he can just burn up a lot of time, he's taking something really valuable from you. What else? Health, okay, yeah. Take health, and actually sometimes he will directly attack health. What else?
Faith.
Your faith, yeah. Precious, nothing. It's more precious than gold, Peter says, and so he wants to steal your faith. What else?
Innocence.
Innocence, yeah.
Your heart.
Your heart, guard your heart. Your family, he wants to destroy your family. He wants to destroy your marriage. He wants you to take your resources, take your money, right? Take precious things. You look at how much attention Satan gives to precious things like sex, which is a precious gift from God that he wants to rob, or relationships that he wants to just get in and destroy. So we know he does that. Father of lies. He's going to be taking truths and turning them into often half lies. He's a murderer. So it means he's always trying to take life. And so that judge friend of mine, why would she want to take a knife and kill her child? But actually, Satan's always about destroying. And as people walk down the path very long, they will be on that path of destruction. A couple years ago, my wife and I were in Phoenix, and we were there for some meetings, and we were in a restaurant. And I noticed somebody just looking closely at us. And she came up and said, "Do I know you?" And we found out we didn't. So that was kind of strange. And then she said, what are you here doing? And I said, I'm here for some meetings of the Christian organization. But she said, it's really interesting. So we started talking and found out that she had grown up in a Christian home, but now was far from God. And we said, why? Well, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to be close to Jesus. Things happen. I said, what do you mean by that? Well, it's just, if we get a little longer, it took a while for it to unfold, found out that she was actually demonically oppressed. And every time she'd start to head towards Jesus, they would make life really bad for her. It would just get really bad. Torment in the night, all kinds of things. And there were some particular reasons why she was being demonically oppressed. So we got her name and said, hey, we're just here for tomorrow, but if you want to meet, we can go after those guys. Well, we could push some light into that darkness. And so she was brave enough to come the next day for breakfast for us, and we sat down. She was kind of nervous, and then I said, do you hear voices in your head? And she said, yeah, all the time. I said, like, what are they saying to you right now? That I'm supposed to kill you. Glad you're ignoring those voices. Yeah, it's crazy. She's got these voices going in her head like, kill that person sitting in front of you. Well, she wouldn't have had the power to do that. But Satan is just destructive. He has joy in destruction. His joy in taking life. And people that are under his control get pulled into that. He's the God of this age. By the way, God did some cool things that time. So he can deliver. And he did even in the morning. Which... God of this age. And the God of this age, 2 Corinthians 4:4, it says he blinds the minds of unbelievers. And so there's a blinding activity that Satan has where he's trying to keep people from seeing. And have you ever, I can remember many times at a camp, we get up to the most important night and we start sharing the gospel. And sometimes I remember somebody right in the middle getting up and walking out. And I remember talking to them afterwards, what's going on? Oh, my whole body felt, I just wanted to crawl out of my skin. Sometimes I'll say, I have this buzzing in my ears. I just couldn't stand sitting there. And it will be like, it's like satanic work to just blind their eyes to this message that's coming. And so it's important to realize when we get to the gospel and we get to the message of Jesus, we will be actively opposed by spiritual forces of evil. So level 1 is temptation and harassment. And you'll find that Jesus was tempted, you'll find Job was tempted and harassed, both of them tempted and harassed, so that it can happen to the most godly people. In fact, I think sometimes being tempted and harassed by Satan is a compliment, or by his forces, because he can't be everywhere, and so if he's chosen to attack you, take it as a compliment. It means you're dangerous to him. So we should expect spiritual warfare. In fact, if we're not getting any spiritual warfare, we should wonder what we're doing wrong, because it means that we're not any threat to the enemy. But temptation and harassment, in the area of temptation, look at Jesus being tempted to sin. Harassment, look at Job. And what happened with Job was Satan was able to bring a storm that knocked down his house. He was able to bring, that's harassment. You can't read it. Temptation and harassment. He was able to bring disease. he was able to actually bring destruction. So Satan can work in the powers of nature. He can work with disease. But what's important to recognize is he had to get permission for every step he took. He did not have the uncontrolled ability to do anything. And this is Satan. In fact, Luther said, the devil is God's devil. Satan is still under God's sovereign control, even though he doesn't want to be. And so he doesn't have unlimited freedom to work. So he can do things, but he can only run up to the line that God has created. Now, God doesn't determine what he does within that line, but Satan always works in boundaries. He's not boundaryless. And so, yes, he can. I think he could kill someone if God extended the line far enough to let him. But it doesn't mean he can randomly go kill anyone he wants, because he had to get permission to do that within those bounds. And I don't know if we also know in 1 Corinthians it says, when you're tested, no one is tested beyond what he is able, but God will give us strength. So God's monitoring the line. Have you ever been pressure, and all of a sudden it lets up? It could be that you actually reached your real limit, and Satan reached his line, and he can't cross it. You follow what I'm saying? So this is not an unregulated war. God is ultimately in control. Temptation and harassment, you find examples of that in these passages. Harassment, in these passages, you have them in there. Satan's goal to keep us from obeying God or lead us to sin. So harassment could keep you from obeying God. My brother's going to pray with someone. He gets harassed. He goes, I'm not going to do that. Was that sin? Well, it wasn't obedience. Sometimes he harasses us to try to keep us. Your car breaks down. The computer doesn't work. What's a win for Satan? That we stop obeying him. That we stop on. So we keep going. We keep going. Sin, it would be we fall into temptation. Then there's level 2, the level of strongholds. A pattern of sinful behavior that enables Satan to exert influence over us. So what can happen is there can be a number of attacks in the same area, and then we just give up in that area. And that area, Satan builds a stronghold. So don't let the sun go down on your wrath, and don't give the devil a what? Foothold, a place that belongs to him. And he says if we need to forgive someone, we've forgiven them because we're not unaware of Satan's schemes. And so there's places that we turn over to the enemy. And what happens is it's kind of like their own little fort on the boundary. Here we have a level of protection. If we sin, we confess. And the believer should have a level of protection. But sometimes there are strongholds. There are places where Satan has a key. And when he comes there, he actually can do whatever he wants. We don't even know, because he's actually attacking us now from the inside. And so you'll find that people who have a stronghold of anger, as soon as they become angry, they're just like out of control. Like the Spirit's gone. Like Satan can just do it. He's pulling on all the levers. He can do whatever he wants. Or when some people have a stronghold in the area of sexual sin, then they're holding their boundaries and everything else. But all it takes is just one little bit here. They never stand. They always fall. And then from that spot, Satan attacks guilt, accusations, all this, and he's actually, then it's like being attacked from inside rather than from outside. So it'd be like you have a room on your house that has an outside door and an inside door, and you got someone with the key to the outside door, and you go and lock all the doors, but you don't lock the door to this room because it's inside. Well, he's got a door that goes to that room that you don't know about. And then the night he goes out and causes a mess in your house. And you come, what happened? I locked all the doors. What happened? There's actually this stronghold that is continually working in your life. And so this is level 1. This is level 2. And level 2 is very dangerous, and I think a lot of people don't know about it. And I would say that maybe 30, 40, 50% of Christians deal with things on level 2. They're actually farther into the enemy's attack than they're aware of. And there are areas of their life that are under the enemy's control, and he has access to whenever he wants. He can just come, got a key, comes in, do whatever he wants. And they're particularly dangerous for someone in Christian service, because it can mean right in the middle of a big fight, he can just come and unlock that door and just cause destruction and cause problems. Level 2. Level 3 And there are 8 primary locations that he seeks to build his strongholds. These are just representative. You can look at them in your notes. There's text with all of them. There's probably more, so those are just example texts. Here's the level 3 is demonization. Level 3. And one of the things that's difficult when we talk about this area is we often talk about demon possession, and that's a phrase that the Bible doesn't use. So, are you demon possessed? Well, the Bible never uses the word demon possession. It's a translation. The word is demonized, and it means basically the situation where there is a specific demonic force either controls or inhabits a person. It's an ongoing, where strongholds are temporary or intermittent, come and go. Demonization is constant at some level. So that demonic force sits in that room and he's there all the time. And often people are just aware of that presence all the time. Now there are levels of demonization all the way to the point of the demoniac who could rip off chains and run around naked. But there are also levels of demonization where there was a chronic illness that was healed when the demonic force was thrown out. And so it wasn't as visible. That person's not running around tearing off chains. So there's different levels to it. And generally what happens is if you trace it back, there were usually a couple of strongholds in that life, in that person's life, where Satan's able to triangulate and set up permanent residence in some area of their life.